Hey, I'm Warren Sprouse, and you are on the Bible's Forum. You know, when you think about the Bible and somebody says something to you about heresy, you think, oh, no, biblical heresy. This is medical heresy that I want to discuss with you tonight. It has biblical overtones, or we wouldn't be talking about it. But over in Great Britain, there is a doctor who has apparently committed the unpardonable sin. He's guilty of medical heresy. He has transgressed the sacred lines of revisionist science. And surely a man like this must be punished, and punished he shall be. Well, what exactly is Dr. David Makareth's crime? A medical doctor who has worked for the UK's National Health Services for 26 years. What did he do? Dr. Makareth dared to affirm that sex is biologically determined. Yeah, that was his terrible transgression. Now, by itself, that's not news. This is the way it's been going for the last 10 years. But there's more to the story. The headline in the Daily Mail says, Christian doctor is sacked by the government for refusing to identify patients by their preferred gender because he believes sex is established at birth. What was he thinking? How could he be so foolish as to believe that a biological male is different than a biological female? How could he not realize that if a man perceives himself to be a woman, or a woman perceives herself to be a man, then for all medical purposes, they are now what they perceive themselves to be. Amen? This doctor said, not so fast. This doctor is a bigot. And he's also scientifically ignorant. That's sarcasm. I knew you'd know that. This British medical professional, responsible for interviewing patients when they come in for treatment, which includes people with life-threatening illnesses, has affirmed, stated, stood on the fact that some biological males are insisting on being registered as females and back and forth. And this medical doctor is tasked with filling out the paperwork as they come in. Are you starting to see the problem? Maybe not so much yet. But it seems the doctors are not concerned with how the patient identifies. They're not interested in knowing if the patient feels at home in his or her body. That's not a doctor's concern. Instead, according to their profession and in harmony with their purpose, they must deal with biological realities. So males are different than females. And it means that in some cases, males must be treated differently than females. A failure on the doctor's part to recognize this as a scientific reality is the height of irrationality and could set him in line for a medical malpractice suit. So what's the caretaker to do when he or she fills out the form according to biological realities, not internal perceptions? When in doing so, this medical doctor might actually be saving the patient's life. The critical issue, however, is that he or she, doctor, does this without the patient's knowledge or approval. And so now in Great Britain, the doctor could be fired for trying to ensure the proper treatment of his or her patient. You see, what if you truly believed with all your heart, and you had believed this for decades, that your blood type was A, when in reality it was B? What would happen? Keep in mind your ID would say B, because that's a scientific medical reality. You've now been in an accident. You're being rushed to the hospital. You need a transfusion. Thankfully, you're still conscious when the medic asks if you know your blood type. And you say, I'm type A. You're type B, but you have self-identified. What would happen? If they don't check, you will die on the operating table because you were given the wrong blood type. Because biology is biology. Perception does not matter. Now, if you get in that situation, call me. I have universal blood. I can give blood to anybody. But there's not a lot of us around. We can't do it for everybody. Israel's prestigious Weizmann Institute reported last year that, quote, researchers have identified 6,500 genes which are expressed differently in men versus women. Now, our British doctor has a new job, and this job would have involved compiling independent reports about the health of the people he's interviewing, people who were claiming disability benefits. But during the orientation, during the training portion of his induction, the instructor declared that the reports must only refer to the gender of the patient or client as he self-identifies. And all of a sudden, this medical doctor said, time out. We got a problem. This is a matter of not just medical integrity on his part. This is a life and death issue. It's an issue of scientific honesty, not of religious belief. He says, I believe his problem stemmed not from his scientific, medical, moral operation, but his religious convictions. The critics and his persecutors insist. So in this case, those values were completely harmonious. He explained to the instructor, I have a problem. I have a problem with this. I have a problem with this doctor. How about you? Not because of his conviction, not because he stands up, but like so many people. He has a medical, scientific point. And what does he say? Well, it's because of my medical moral orientation, my religious conviction, I can't do this. No! Well, yeah, but that's not the major point. You can have all that you want. But you can't give type A blood to type B patients. It's not going to happen. Gender is defined by biology and genetics, not by your Bible. The Bible just simply goes along with, teaches us that God made men and women different. They're male, female. He could have kept his mouth shut, he says. But he felt it was the right time to raise this issue. And for raising that issue, he was fired. Now his warning, he is talking about this. He says, I don't think I should be compelled to use a specific pronoun. I'm not out to upset anybody. But if upsetting somebody can lead to doctors being sacked, then as a society, we have to examine where we're going. He said, we face the same issue everywhere. Here in the United States, we have that kind of an issue. In Canada, Professor Jordan Peterson has sounded the alarm about the dangers of government-compelled speech. Does anybody understand why free speech is a constitutionally protected right? To control one's words is to control his or her life choices, his or her opinions, his or her destiny. This is not a debate about homosexuality or transvestism and transvestitism. It's about freedom. And more, we don't have the freedom of speech. We're not entitled to our opinions anymore. Now, we can think and believe anything we want, but we dare not express them without punishment. And so far, that punishment is social. In the case of this medical doctor, it cost him his job. And he was right. And the people are wrong. And they're going to kill somebody. Now do you see why elections have consequences? I've lived long enough to be aware of at least 8 presidents, from Eisenhower to Trump. I was alive before Eisenhower, but I didn't know anything about Harry. Each time the mantle passed to the party out of power, core issues in the lives of Americans changed. Not simply from a legal, social, political orientation, but from how Americans now lived and spoke. It's been amazing to watch people switch gears en masse with a new administration as it comes in, almost as though it's hardwired into our system. Under Ronald Reagan, life in America became more prosperous, more productive. Under Bill Clinton, the first 2 years were starting to point us down a dark road. If it weren't for Dick Morris convincing Clinton to make some changes, no telling where we would have ended up. Now, a lot of it was cosmetic in a lot of ways, but it kept us out of serious economic downturn. And then came George Bush and 9/11. Which derailed whatever he had intended to do. We will never know. Then it was Obama, who was about as clever as they came. Clearly a hands-off figurehead with a gift of gab. Now we have a successful businessman who doesn't care who he offends on any level. And people who have been out of work for years are now working. And people who have been enamored of Democrats are now cheering Trump. This whole transgenderism thing is one of the greatest threats our society has ever faced. It is at once foolish and insane. And as this doctor is pointing out, it's physically dangerous. And that doesn't even include the behaviors these people engage in. Is it normal? Well, yeah, in the sense that human beings are totally susceptible to all things self-absorbed and self-exalting. The stories coming out from these folks are truly sad. And not a few of them expose the physical, moral, and spiritual destruction that the transgender world offers, creates. But we live in a free country. We can be and do whatever we want. Right? No. Not without consequences. I'll get an email. I'll get comments telling me how wonderful all this is and how completely out of touch I am. And neither are as true as these writers believe. We have people in America who live as though they're cats, and they're happy to do so. But the medical diagnosis for these people is at least mentally deranged, or something like it, delusional. Yes, you can change your appearance, but you will never change your biological orientation. I've seen pictures of people who have had their skin altered by tattoos to look like a snake. Eyes that have the perpendicular pupils. All sorts of things. And these people work hard to get other people to accept them the way they want to be accepted. But there are some lifestyles that'll kill you. And this is one of them. Are you allowed to do it in a free country? Absolutely. But when your medical doctor cannot give you the proper care because of your opinion, we got some serious problem. Serious problem. And it's not going to get better. Tell me what you think.